Triple H is in charge of WWE's creative department alongside his role as the head of WWE Talent Relations. This has made him the most important name in wrestling once again, right alongside his wife Stephanie McMahon. With that, there's a lot that he's facing at the moment. Taking over from Vince McMahon is not easy. He has to make a number of changes that will make both the fans and the shareholders happy. In such a situation, there are likely to be a number of changes, both positive and negative. This is Wrestling Hub, and these are the changes Triple H can make to WWE. Before we get into the rest of the video, make sure you subscribe to Wrestling Hub and turn on all notifications to stay up to date with everything in the world of pro wrestling. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Wrestling Hub Official, and also follow us on Twitter at Wrestling_Hub. For a long time, wrestling has become overflooded with too much wrestling in the ring and too little story outside. In NXT, when Triple H was in charge, he managed to give a mixture of both, something that's sorely lacking currently, with too many weird storylines and very little wrestling. However, even he is guilty of letting just proper wrestling take the forefront. On Raw and SmackDown, there have been issues with too much of a storyline and too few matches. In fact, on a recent episode of SmackDown, it was calculated that out of the 2 whole hours, only 17 minutes were spent with actual wrestling. The rest of the time was devoted to something else entirely. Triple H is likely to introduce better wrestling back to WWE, something fans already saw at SummerSlam in the recent episode of Raw. With Mustafa Ali featuring and other stars wrestling, there was a back-to-basics feel about the show, and that's the best thing the company could have done. It worked, and this Raw was one of the best in a long time. But there's still a long way to go. However, here Triple H also needs to be cautious. While it's amazing that he has introduced proper wrestling back to a wrestling show like WWE, at the same time he's going to need to make sure he does not go too far. NXT Black and Gold towards the end lacked stories and was mostly only about the matches, and it showed. There was a huge cost to this, with fans losing interest in the shows overall. If Triple H can find a balance between wrestling and storytelling, it would be amazing, but fans are worried that it might go too heavily with wrestling. Vince McMahon has a well-known hatred of tag team wrestling that no one can explain. The former CEO went out of his way to split up every team that did well, and couldn't seem to ever back the division enough to make it look like the biggest thing in the business. Tag team wrestling legend Arn Anderson talked about McMahon's hatred of teams, and equated it with Vince having to pay people more than if they wrestled singles matches. If that's the case, then that's one of the dumbest reasons to hate a whole form of wrestling. I can't specifically tell you when it was. I bet you can though, where they went through all these factions, and I was in WCW at the time. Remember the factions? There were probably 5, 6, 7 of them, and they had 4 or 5 guys in a group. You know, Taker had APA and all those guys with him. You had the guys from Puerto Rico. You had all these different factions. You had DX. All those guys, and I would have just been guessing. Well, when you started paying all those groups, when you would have the big shows and you would have a lot of those factions on there, man, you had a lot of sets of trends. So it went from being just a tag team to 4 guys, maybe 5 if there was a manager involved. But managers were starting to go away during that period as well. But if you met all those transportation costs to pay and all that, a measure it just get expensive and it's probably overwhelming. So when he decided to peel back from factions and all that, he probably just included tag matches in the equation, and that was a mistake. Now with Triple H in charge, this will likely change. Fans of early NXT will remember that he was the one who helped teams like The Revival, Authors of Pain, American Alpha, The Undisputed Era, and others have unforgettable matches. It's likely that in a few years, WWE's main roster will also have a cemented tag team division. This would be perfect for them, as with rivals AEW, the tag division is one of their greatest strengths. Vince McMahon didn't do anything that he didn't want to do for his business, but that didn't mean that he was holding back. In fact, the man made sure that if he felt there was an opportunity in a particular part of the business, then that was the focus for him. He didn't care about the risks in his decisions if he decided that there was a story to tell. The man lacked self-preservation, showing celebrities how to take a bump by jumping off a balcony at the age of 76. In his stories, he also went as far as he needed to make sure that his vision of the stars became clear to the fans. He demolished his competition by sinking to any means necessary. He destroyed the territory system. He demolished the Ultimate Warrior. He screwed over Bret Hart. With all of that, at no point did he stop to think if he was taking too big a risk. This is not the same as Triple H. The man has a lot to care for with a wife he loves and 3 children. His position in WWE is also not as cemented as Vince's was, given the difference in their levels of power. It's likely that WWE, in a product sense, will be safe going forward. With the already corporate nature of the business, the further safety might take away from the product. One of the major divisions to have suffered in the last 2 years is the women's division. Charlotte, Becky, Sasha, and Bayley have all been out of action for large parts of time. In that time, the company only pushed Asuka and very few others. Instead, they released large part of their women's division and prospective stars who were helping lead the way. The division is weak and damaged, but as was already seen at SummerSlam, that won't be the case for long. The biggest issue WWE was facing was bringing women up from NXT only to treat them like jobbers and not put on the good matches that they were capable of. Triple H not only knows all the women in NXT, he helped a lot of them get where they are. He brought back Dakota Kai and also helped Io Shirai, aka Io Sky, whose contract had been about to expire, and made them a major faction with Bayley on the main roster. While it's too early to predict the future, it's clear that with Triple H booking the shows, NXT stars won't be treated as fodder. There's a lot of potential going into these angles and stories, and the women's division might be due for a revival. There have also been reports that Sasha Banks and Naomi could head back to WWE now that Triple H is in charge, instead of people like John Laurinaitis and Vince McMahon. Overall, the future looks bright for women in the company. Stephanie McMahon is the co-CEO of WWE. This means that she has a lot of work on her plate. However, with Nick Khan sharing the mantle, it might not be a position in which she is too overworked. Stephanie could be one of the biggest positives of the company in her position, as she can help make the big picture decisions that can take the company forward. Unfortunately, she's also the person who could be a big negative. With Triple H busy with creative, he won't have time to appear on the show on a regular basis. That does not mean that Stephanie won't. While Triple H's presence is usually quite a good thing for the company, the fact that he won't stop his wife from becoming a person appearing regularly on the show could hurt the company in the long term. It might have been far better if Stephanie never appeared in programming and Triple H did instead. Fans are tired of her as a heel who portrays herself as a face when the situation suits her. This might be one of the biggest negatives that fans have to look forward to. Of all people, Triple H has always been open to working with other companies whenever the situation suits WWE. While this might not mean that they'd work with AEW, it also doesn't mean that they wouldn't. It's unlikely there will be any AEW and WWE combined pay-per-views in the future, but it also means that there's a chance for them to have deals that allow talent to work in both promotions at some point in time. Whether this will work in the near future or not remains to be seen. As was seen with Evolve and other indie promotions, Triple H himself extended a helping hand and even appeared on their shows when required. In fact, he has said before that he would be open to working with other companies. You know, in what you've seen in the past, Progress, ICW, Evolve, all those things. Yeah, we're open for business in a lot of ways, and a lot of things, and a lot of everything. People's thoughts, misperceptions, their perceived knowledge of what we do, how we think, and all that stuff is often greatly misinterpreted and not necessarily accurate. So okay, are we open to the right business opportunities? Yeah, at any given time we're open to things, and it just depends on what they are, and if they're beneficial to us long term. And again, when I say long term, I'm not talking about 3 months or 6 months. Long term, 10 years, 10 years, 15 years from now. Is that beneficial? Is that meaningful? Is that long term? That's how we think. It's much longer in duration, not necessarily worried about the minute by minutes. It's the long duration, and so open for business. If this does happen, fans might get to see a lot of their dream matches take place sooner rather than later. One of the biggest negatives of Triple H is that he does not take things lying down. When it comes to Vince McMahon, one thing he was always good at was doing whatever was best for business. Be it working with stars who insulted him in the past or not, he did not turn away from it. He made the decision knowing that it was the right thing to do for wrestling. Triple H is not this person. In fact, he has held grudges in business and is known for it. In that situation, he might not be the easiest person to work with in case there will always be some wrestlers who will never have a place in WWE. One of the biggest issues in WWE over the past decade has been the fact that WWE has forced wrestlers to stick to a script. This has led to everyone sounding like everyone else. As a result, they are free on the mic and are able to portray themselves better than they could under the restrictive rules that were imposed by Vince McMahon. Already, results of this can be seen with the rules being loosened. Aside from the mic, they also have the right to do more in the ring as they want to do and not stick to another script for that. One major change that has happened over the last several weeks in WWE is the loosening up of freedom for the talents when they speak on the mic, allowing them to improvise more. We are told that a big part of what made the Sheamus vs. Drew McIntyre match so great on SmackDown is at least a sizable portion of the match was called in the ring versus every single spot laid out to them ahead of time. And these were some changes that Triple H can make to WWE. I hope you're all having a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.